The censors reacted half a second too late. The sentence would later appear in dozens of Academy reports, highlighted in yellow and debated by professors across 3-star systems. But on the day it happened, nobody was thinking about reports. Nobody was taking notes. They were too busy staring at the human. The bio-observation dome stretched nearly 400 feet across, a self-contained ecosystem designed to simulate environments from dozens of inhabited worlds. Artificial sunlight filtered through the transparent ceiling overhead. Moisture drifted through the air from hidden climate regulators. Exotic plants climbed steel support structures, their glowing leaves casting soft shades of blue and green across the pathways below. Students moved between observation stations while instructors monitored the behavior of several harmless research animals kept inside controlled habitats. It was supposed to be an ordinary educational exercise. Ariel Voss stood near the center platform, adjusting the translation settings on her wrist device. The young alien exchange student had arrived at the academy only 4 days earlier, and already she was growing tired of hearing people talk about humans. According to the stories, Earth was a death world. According to the stories, humans possessed unusual instincts. According to the stories, they could detect danger faster than most species. Ariel considered most of it exaggerated. From what she had seen so far, humans seemed surprisingly average, especially Daniel Brooks. At that exact moment, Daniel stood nearly 30 feet away near a maintenance access panel, holding a diagnostic scanner in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other. His brown work jacket looked worn from years of use. His boots carried faint scratches from maintenance work. Nothing about him suggested danger. Nothing about him suggested superiority. He looked like a man fixing equipment because equipment needed fixing. Ariel glanced toward him and almost laughed. This was the legendary Deathworld species everyone talked about? Then something changed. Not dramatically. Not loudly. A small movement near the edge of the habitat. One of the research creatures had somehow slipped through a partially secured enclosure gate. The animal itself was not dangerous. It was roughly the size of a medium dog and known for its speed rather than aggression. Most students did not notice it immediately. Neither did the instructors. The sensors embedded around the habitat had not triggered yet. Ariel certainly did not see it. Daniel did. Before any alarm sounded. Before any warning light activated. Before anyone else even turned their head. Daniel moved. The motion was so natural it almost seemed casual. He set down his coffee, took 3 quick steps, changed direction once, then reached forward with perfect timing. A fraction of a second later, the research animal bounded into the exact spot where his hands already waited. The creature blinked in surprise. Daniel calmly secured it against his chest without hurting it. Silence swept across the observation floor. Several students stared. One instructor looked down at the monitoring display in confusion. Then the sensors finally activated. A warning tone echoed through the dome. Half a second late, Daniel glanced toward the flashing panel. "Well," he said calmly, "good to know those still work." A few students laughed nervously. Ariel did not. She kept staring at him. Not because he had caught the animal. Plenty of trained handlers could have done that. What bothered her was everything that happened before. How had he known? The creature had been hidden behind dense vegetation. The sensors had missed it. The instructors had missed it. Every student in the area had missed it. Yet Daniel reacted as though someone had announced it over a loudspeaker. One of the professors approached him. "How did you spot it?" Daniel shrugged. The birds stopped singing. The professor blinked. "The what?" Daniel pointed towards several small avian creatures perched along an artificial tree branch. They had gone silent moments before the escape. Something changed. They noticed first. The professor looked uncertain. The students looked even more confused. Daniel simply picked up his coffee and returned to the maintenance panel as though nothing unusual had happened. Around him, conversations immediately erupted. Ariel remained where she stood. For the first time since arriving at the academy, she felt something she had not expected to feel toward a human. Curiosity. Because the most unsettling part was not what Daniel had done. It was how completely ordinary he seemed while doing it. 4 days earlier, Ariel Voss had arrived at the academy with a suitcase, a scholarship, and a long list of assumptions. The transport shuttle descended through layers of silver cloud above Meridian Station, revealing a structure so large it looked more like a floating city than a school. Towers of glass and alloy stretched across nearly 3 miles of orbital infrastructure. Docking rings rotated slowly around the central habitat core. Thousands of lights shimmered against the darkness of space beyond. Ariel pressed her hand against the shuttle window as the station grew larger. She had dreamed about studying here since childhood. Meridian was one of the most respected scientific institutions in the known systems. Students arrived from hundreds of worlds. Researchers came to exchange ideas, test theories, and study species unlike anything they could encounter at home. For Ariel, it was an opportunity to finally see humanity for herself. During the flight, she had reviewed every human profile provided by the Academy. The files described Earth as a death world. High gravity, dangerous weather, predatory wildlife, geological instability, seasonal extremes. Ariel found most of it amusing. Her homeworld of Valoria had spent centuries eliminating environmental threats. Dangerous animals had been relocated. Climate systems stabilized. Natural disasters predicted years in advance. Progress, according to Valorian philosophy, meant removing unnecessary risks from daily life. Humanity seemed to have done the opposite. The shuttle finally docked with a gentle vibration. Moments later, Ariel stepped into the station for the first time. Warm artificial air carried the scent of polished metal and recycled oxygen. Students moved through the terminal in every direction. Some floated small luggage drones beside them. Others hurried toward lectures displayed on glowing wrist screens. The station felt alive. During orientation, the new arrivals gathered inside a vast auditorium overlooking the stars. A holographic instructor welcomed them to Meridian and began introducing important species represented throughout the Academy. When humans appeared on the display, several students exchanged curious looks. Ariel noticed the image immediately. The presentation showed a human standing beneath a mountain range on Earth. The speaker listed familiar facts: high endurance, exceptional adaptability, unusual environmental resilience. Several students whispered quietly. Ariel rolled her eyes. Beside her, another exchange student leaned closer. Do you think they are really that impressive? Ariel shrugged. Every academy seems to have its legends. The student laughed. You think humans are a legend? I think every species enjoys exaggerating its own achievements. That belief remained unchanged for the next several days. Humans appeared everywhere across Meridian. Some taught classes. Some worked in engineering departments. Others studied alongside everyone else. None seemed particularly extraordinary. They smiled, complained about assignments, drank too much coffee, forgot deadlines. They looked remarkably normal, which only reinforced Ariel's opinion. Then she heard the name Daniel Brooks for the first time. It happened during a laboratory briefing. One of the instructors mentioned that the station's bio-observation systems had been redesigned by a human safety specialist. Daniel notices things most people miss, the instructor explained casually. If he tells you something feels wrong, listen. Several students nodded. Ariel almost laughed. Feels wrong? That hardly sounded scientific. She expected a legendary Deathworld expert, a survival specialist, perhaps a decorated explorer. Instead, she eventually found Daniel repairing a malfunctioning access door while balancing a coffee cup on top of his toolbox. Nothing about him matched the stories. He was not intimidating. He was not dramatic. He barely seemed interested in being noticed. The entire reputation of humanity suddenly felt even more exaggerated. Standing there in the corridor, watching him tighten a loose panel screw, Ariel came to a simple conclusion. The Academy had spent years building myths around a species that was ultimately ordinary. 4 days later, inside the bio-observation dome, she watched Daniel react to a hidden problem before the sensors detected it. For the first time since arriving at Meridian Station, Ariel began wondering whether the myths existed for a reason. The incident inside the bio-observation dome became one of the most discussed topics on Meridian Station by the following morning. Not because a research animal had escaped. Such things happened occasionally. Safety systems existed precisely because living creatures were unpredictable. What people kept discussing was the timing. Students replayed the security footage between classes. Instructors reviewed it during staff meetings. Entire online discussion threads appeared overnight across the Academy network. The question remained the same. How had Daniel Brooks reacted before the sensors? Ariel spent most of the morning trying to answer it herself. The xenobiology archives occupied an entire level of the academy. Towering walls of transparent data panels stretched toward a ceiling nearly 70 feet above the floor. Holographic information drifted through the air like floating constellations. Species profiles, environmental records, biological studies, and historical reports could be accessed with a simple gesture. Ariel sat alone at a workstation reviewing everything she could find about humans. At first, the information seemed familiar. High gravity adaptation, dense bone structures, advanced endurance, exceptional thermoregulation. Nothing she had not already read before arriving. Then she noticed a recurring phrase appearing throughout dozens of reports. Situational awareness. The term appeared again and again. Military studies, exploration missions, rescue operations, search and recovery teams. Human subjects consistently demonstrated an unusual ability to recognize environmental changes before automated systems identified them. Ariel frowned. That sounded suspiciously similar to what she had witnessed. She opened another report. Then another. The pattern continued. Some studies suggested humans processed environmental information differently from many species. Not faster exactly. Broader. More constantly. They noticed sounds, smells, movement patterns, behavioral shifts, and subtle changes in surroundings without consciously focusing on them. Ariel leaned back in her chair. The explanation felt unsatisfying. Scientific. Logical. Yet somehow incomplete. 3 hours later, she found Daniel exactly where she expected. Working. Maintenance Sector 9 stretched beneath the academy like the hidden skeleton of a living organism. Cargo elevators moved continuously between levels. Service drones drifted along overhead rails. Pipes carrying water, power, and atmospheric systems disappeared into walls lined with access panels. The air smelled faintly of machine oil and warm metal. Daniel stood halfway inside an open maintenance compartment, replacing a damaged relay unit. A portable radio sat nearby, playing quiet music from Earth. Ariel approached. Daniel glanced over his shoulder. "Let me guess," he said. "You have questions." "Several. That usually happens." Ariel folded her arms. "How did you know the animal escaped yesterday?" Daniel slid a tool into his pocket. "I already told the professor." The bird stopped singing. "That is right. That is not a scientific answer." Daniel stepped out from the maintenance compartment and looked genuinely puzzled. "It is exactly a scientific answer." Ariel blinked. "Explain." He pointed toward a ventilation shaft overhead. "You hear that?" Ariel listened. "Air moving through ducts. Nothing unusual." "What about it?" "One of the fans is running slightly slower than the others." Ariel stared at him. "You can hear that." "Sure." He looked around. "Also, the humidity is a little higher than yesterday." "You noticed that too?" Most people would. Ariel knew that was not true. Daniel grabbed his toolkit and started walking toward the next maintenance assignment. She followed. "How often do you pay attention to things like that?" Daniel shrugged. "All the time." "That sounds exhausting." "Not really." He smiled. "It is just background noise." They turned a corner. Ahead, 2 students were arguing over a malfunctioning information terminal. Before either could explain the problem, Daniel looked at the display and said, "Try the secondary power relay." One student pressed a control sequence. The screen immediately came back online. Both students looked surprised. Daniel kept walking. "How did you know?" Ariel asked. The screen flickered blue instead of white. "And that means something?" "Usually." He said it so casually that Ariel almost laughed. Almost. Because for the first time since arriving at Meridian Station, she was beginning to understand what unsettled people about humans. It was not strength. It was not intelligence. It was the strange feeling that while everyone else was looking at the world, humans somehow seemed to be listening to it as well. By the end of the week, Ariel had developed a habit she refused to admit to anyone. She started following Daniel's maintenance schedule. Not closely enough to seem suspicious. At least that was what she told herself. The truth was simpler. Every time she observed him, she learned something new. The academy itself became a laboratory. Corridors, classrooms, transit hubs, cafeterias. Daniel moved through all of them with the same quiet awareness. One afternoon, Ariel sat inside a crowded student commons reviewing coursework when she noticed him enter through the eastern doorway. Nothing unusual happened. Daniel purchased coffee, exchanged a few words with a cafeteria worker, and headed toward an empty table. Yet halfway across the room, he suddenly changed direction. A few seconds later, a service cart emerged from a side corridor at excessive speed. The driver managed to stop safely, but only because the path ahead had already been cleared. Daniel had moved before the cart became visible. Ariel lowered her tablet. Again. Later that day, she spotted him near a transportation junction connecting 3 academic sectors. Hundreds of students crossed the area every hour. The noise level was constant. Footsteps, conversations, announcement systems, air recyclers humming overhead. Daniel paused near an intersection and glanced upward. 10 seconds later, a maintenance drone descended unexpectedly from an access hatch above. The safety systems functioned perfectly. No one was ever in danger. But Daniel had stepped aside before the drone appeared. Ariel stared. It felt less like observation and more like prediction. The following morning, she decided to stop guessing and start measuring. She borrowed environmental monitoring equipment from the xenobiology department and spent several hours recording Daniel during routine assignments. Sound levels, temperature fluctuations, air currents, movement patterns. If Daniel was detecting something, she wanted proof. The results only made the mystery worse. In several cases, he reacted to environmental changes before her instruments recorded meaningful differences. Not dramatically, not impossibly, just enough to be unsettling. That afternoon, she finally confronted him. Daniel was replacing filters inside an atmospheric processing room nearly 600 feet below the main academic levels. The chamber echoed with the rhythmic pulse of ventilation turbines. Warm air flowed through enormous ducts overhead. Ariel approached, carrying a tablet full of data. "I think you are doing something unusual." Daniel glanced at the screen. "That sounds serious." "I am serious. That is what worries me." She ignored the comment. "Your reaction times are inconsistent with predictive models." "Maybe the models are wrong." "Models are rarely wrong." Daniel smiled. "That sounds exactly like something a scientist would say." Ariel held up the tablet. "You notice things before sensors." "Sometimes." "Why?" Daniel thought for a moment. The turbines hummed around them. Finally, he pointed toward one of the ventilation ducts. "What do you hear?" Ariel listened. "Airflow. Machinery. Nothing remarkable. The system is running normally." "Mostly." Daniel tightened a filter housing. "One bearing is wearing out." Ariel frowned. "You can hear that." "Not exactly." "Then what?" Daniel searched for words. "Imagine spending your entire life around storms." Ariel remained silent. "Eventually," he continued, "you stop noticing the storm itself. You notice when something changes inside it." For several seconds, neither spoke. The answer was frustratingly vague. Yet as Daniel returned to work, Ariel found herself replaying it again and again. Because for the first time, she wondered if humanity's greatest adaptation was not strength or endurance. Perhaps it was growing up in a world so chaotic that humans learned to recognize tiny changes everyone else overlooked. That evening, Ariel abandoned observation and turned to research. If Daniel Brooks truly represented something unusual about humanity, the answer had to exist somewhere inside the Academy archives. The xenobiology wing remained open 24 hours a day, and by midnight most students had already returned to their dormitories. The vast research hall felt almost cathedral-like in the quiet. Soft blue illumination drifted across endless shelves of data crystals. Holographic displays floated silently above empty workstations. Beyond the transparent ceiling, distant stars shone against the darkness of space. Ariel sat alone, surrounded by information collected across centuries of interstellar contact. At first, she searched for studies about human perception. Then she expanded her search. Environmental adaptation, survival behavior, evolutionary psychology, apex predators, Earth ecosystems. The deeper she looked, the stranger the picture became. Earth itself seemed almost irrational. The planet's history included ice ages, volcanic eruptions, powerful storms, droughts, earthquakes, floods, and countless environmental challenges. Predators hunted prey. Prey adapted to predators. Entire species disappeared while new ones emerged. Compared to Valoria, Earth looked less like a civilized world and more like an endless negotiation with chaos. Ariel activated another report. This one focused on human ancestors. The accompanying images showed early humans crossing harsh landscapes, carrying tools and supplies through difficult conditions. The report highlighted something unexpected. Humans were not the strongest predators on Earth. They were not the fastest. They were not the most heavily armored. Yet they survived because they observed. They adapted. They noticed patterns. Ariel paused. That sounded familiar. She opened another file. Then another. The same theme appeared repeatedly. Human success often depended upon recognizing small details before those details became larger problems. Weather changes, animal behavior, shifts in sound, variations in scent, tiny environmental clues. Suddenly Daniel's explanation inside the maintenance sector made more sense. Humans did not wait for danger to announce itself. They learned to notice its approach. Hours passed without Ariel realizing it. By the time she finally stood from her workstation, the station clock showed nearly 2 in the morning. She rubbed tired eyes and headed toward the residential levels. The corridors were mostly empty at that hour. Overhead lighting dimmed automatically during the night cycle. The usual crowds had disappeared. Only a handful of maintenance staff remained active. As Ariel rounded a corner near the central transit hub, she noticed someone sitting alone beside a panoramic observation window. Daniel. A paper cup rested beside him. The stars reflected softly across the glass behind him. For several seconds, she considered walking past. Then Daniel glanced over. You have that research face again. Ariel stopped. Research face. The one that means you have been reading reports for too many hours. She looked down at the data tablet still in her hand. Fair observation. Human specialty. A faint smile appeared on his face. Ariel sat in the empty chair nearby. Neither spoke immediately. The station hummed quietly around them. Somewhere in the distance, a transport shuttle departed its docking bay. I spent 6 hours reading about Earth, Ariel finally said. Daniel winced. That sounds dangerous. Your planet is dangerous. Fair point. Ariel studied him. Can I ask you something? Probably. Are humans predators? Daniel did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked through the observation window toward the stars. Technically, yes. Ariel waited. That does not seem to bother you. Daniel shrugged. It is just biology. Most species would consider it significant. Most species did not grow up on Earth. The answer felt incomplete. Yet before she could ask another question, Daniel continued. People hear the word predator and imagine something frightening. His gaze remained fixed on the stars. But predators survive because they pay attention. They learn. They adapt. They understand consequences. Ariel sat quietly. Daniel finally looked back toward her. The important question is not whether humans can be predators. Then what is the important question? Daniel smiled faintly. What they choose to do with that instinct. For reasons she could not fully explain, that answer stayed with Ariel long after she returned to her room. Because for the first time, she was beginning to suspect that humanity's most unusual trait was not hidden inside its biology. It was hidden inside its restraint. The next afternoon, Ariel found herself standing outside Laboratory Wing 7 with a question she could not stop thinking about. If humans possessed instincts shaped by a dangerous world, what happened when those instincts encountered something vulnerable instead of threatening? The answer arrived sooner than expected. Laboratory Wing 7 housed a collection of small biological specimens used for behavioral studies. Most were harmless. Some were rare. All required careful monitoring. The facility remained quiet compared to the larger research sectors. Soft white lighting illuminated rows of transparent habitats. Environmental controls maintained precise temperatures. Gentle ventilation systems carried the faint scent of clean air and growing vegetation. Ariel entered expecting another ordinary observation session. Instead, she discovered Daniel kneeling beside one of the smaller enclosures. At first, she thought something was wrong. A maintenance toolkit sat open beside him. Several diagnostic instruments rested on the floor. Yet Daniel was not repairing equipment. He was watching a creature no larger than a house cat. The animal belonged to a species from a distant forest moon. Large eyes reflected the overhead lighting. Thin silver fur covered its body. According to the habitat display, the animal had refused food for nearly 2 days after being transported to Meridian Station. Several specialists were already investigating possible causes. Daniel noticed Ariel approaching. Afternoon. What are you doing? Waiting. Ariel glanced toward the enclosure. For what? Trust. The answer made no sense. Daniel pointed toward a small dish of food resting near the habitat entrance. The little guy has been stressed since arrival. Ariel folded her arms. You are a maintenance technician. Correct. And now you are a behavioral specialist? Not officially. The creature shifted slightly deeper into its shelter. Daniel remained completely still. Several minutes passed. He did not reach toward the enclosure. He did not attempt interaction. He simply sat there. Eventually, the animal emerged a few inches farther than before. Daniel smiled. There we go. Ariel stared. That is progress. For him, yes. You knew it would happen? No, Daniel shook his head. I just knew forcing it would make things worse. Ariel looked at the small creature. Then at Daniel. Then back again. Something felt strangely inconsistent. This was the same species she had spent days studying. The same species described in reports about predators, survival instincts, and environmental resilience. Yet the human sitting beside her seemed infinitely patient. You could probably catch that animal before it moved 3 feet, Ariel said. Daniel laughed. Probably. Then why sit here for 20 minutes waiting? His answer came without hesitation. Because I do not need to catch it. The simplicity of the statement silenced her. Around them, the laboratory remained peaceful. Environmental systems hummed softly overhead. Sunlight from the station's artificial day cycle filtered through a nearby observation window. The small animal cautiously approached the food dish. Daniel did not move. He barely breathed. Eventually, the creature began eating. A quiet notification appeared on the habitat monitor. Feeding behavior restored. Ariel noticed something unexpected. Relief crossed Daniel's face. Genuine relief. As though solving the problem mattered far beyond professional responsibility. You care about these animals, she said. Most people here do. That is not what I mean. Daniel glanced toward the enclosure. Maybe. For several moments, neither spoke. Then Ariel finally understood why her research kept leading in circles. Every scientific report focused on what humans were capable of doing. Strength, endurance, awareness, adaptation. But none of those qualities explained the most confusing thing about Daniel Brooks. The same instincts that allowed him to notice danger also allowed him to notice fear. The same attention that tracked problems also recognized vulnerability. Humanity's mystery was becoming clearer, not because humans possessed the instincts of predators, because they seemed capable of choosing compassion while carrying them. And somehow that was far more difficult to explain. The failure began during what should have been the safest class of the semester. The bioecology dome occupied an entire section of Meridian Station and served as a controlled environment for studying life forms from different worlds. Every habitat was monitored. Every species was cataloged. Every safety protocol had been reviewed countless times. Nothing dangerous was supposed to happen there. That assumption lasted until 10:43 on a quiet Thursday morning. Ariel arrived early for an advanced ecology seminar. Students gathered around observation platforms overlooking a vast enclosed habitat designed to simulate a dense forest ecosystem. Artificial sunlight filtered through layers of vegetation. Mist drifted between towering alien trees. Streams wound through rocky terrain beneath carefully maintained environmental controls. The centerpiece of the habitat was a large quadrupedal species known as a Varkesh runner. Despite its intimidating appearance, the animal was generally considered manageable when properly supervised. The species was intelligent, highly sensitive to environmental stress, and remarkably fast. Several researchers stood nearby conducting routine behavioral assessments while students observed from elevated walkways. Ariel noticed Daniel almost immediately. He was standing near a maintenance access point replacing a diagnostic module on one of the environmental monitoring systems. Coffee sat beside his toolbox. Nothing unusual, at least not at first. The lecture had barely begun when a sharp warning tone echoed across the habitat. Every conversation stopped. Several researchers looked toward a nearby control station. Then another warning sounded. Environmental fluctuation detected. A holographic status display flashed yellow. Ariel frowned. Minor system alerts happened occasionally. Usually they were resolved within seconds. This time the warning indicators continued multiplying across the screen. Humidity levels shifted unexpectedly. Lighting synchronization drifted outside acceptable parameters. Automated climate regulators began issuing correction commands. Students exchanged uncertain glances. Instructors moved toward the control consoles. The habitat itself responded immediately. Several smaller animals retreated into shelter. Birds that normally filled the artificial forest with sound suddenly fell silent. Ariel felt a chill run through her spine. She had seen that pattern before. Her eyes searched the habitat. The Varkesh runner had stopped moving. Completely. The large animal stood near a stream beneath the canopy, head raised, muscles tense. It was listening, watching. Something about the environment no longer felt right to it. Around the observation platforms, confusion spread. The animal had not become aggressive. It had not threatened anyone. Yet every researcher in the habitat suddenly looked concerned. A new alert appeared. Habitat stress response escalating. Several instructors immediately began guiding students toward designated exits. Ariel turned toward Daniel. The human had already stopped working. His toolbox remained open. His coffee sat forgotten beside the maintenance panel. Daniel was not looking at the control displays. He was looking directly at the Varkesh runner. For a brief moment, Ariel saw something she had never seen before. Absolute focus. Not panic. Not fear. Something older. Quieter. The same expression she imagined a wilderness guide might wear while reading a storm on the horizon. Daniel reached for his communicator. Control, this is Brooks. His voice remained calm. Recommend reducing audio stimuli in Habitat 3. A technician responded immediately. Why? Daniel's eyes never left the animal. Because it is already overstimulated. Several researchers turned toward him. How do you know? Someone asked. Daniel pointed toward the habitat. Look at the ears. Ariel looked. The subtle shift was almost impossible to notice. Yet once she saw it, she could not unsee it. The animal was no longer reacting to any single sound. It was reacting to all of them. At once, Daniel exhaled slowly. Something is wrong. The words were quiet, almost gentle. Yet Ariel felt her stomach tighten. Because during weeks of observation, she had learned something important about Daniel Brooks. Whenever he said something was wrong, he was almost always right. The first thing Daniel did was lower his voice. Around him, instructors hurried between control stations while technicians searched diagnostic feeds for the source of the environmental instability. Warning indicators continued flashing across multiple displays. Climate regulators adjusted temperatures by fractions of a degree. Humidity levels fluctuated. Sound dampeners activated and deactivated as the system attempted automatic corrections. None of it seemed dramatic to the students watching from the observation platforms. Yet the Varkesh runner felt every change. Daniel knew that much immediately. Reduce non-essential communications inside the habitat, he said into his communicator, and dim the secondary lighting by 20%. A technician responded with confusion. Would that help? It might. The answer was simple. Not certain. Just possible. Several researchers nearby exchanged skeptical looks. Daniel ignored them. His attention remained fixed on the animal standing beneath the artificial canopy. The Varkesh runner had not moved in nearly a minute. That worried him more than movement would have. Ariel watched from several yards away. The difference in Daniel was impossible to miss now. He was still calm, still polite. Yet every part of his attention seemed focused on the habitat, the way a navigator might watch approaching weather, or the way someone listens to a familiar song and immediately notices a single wrong note. The environmental controls adjusted again. The forest lighting softened slightly. Several unnecessary alert tones disappeared from the habitat speakers. Almost immediately, the Varkesh runner's posture changed. Only a little, but enough for Daniel to notice. Good, he murmured. There you are. Ariel frowned. What changed? Daniel kept watching. It relaxed one muscle group. You can tell from here? Mostly. He pointed toward the animal's shoulders. It is starting to process information again. Ariel followed his gaze. She still struggled to see what he saw. Yet Daniel appeared completely certain. Across the habitat, researchers continued investigating the source of the environmental disruption. Eventually, a technician called through the communication network. We found it. Relief spread through the control center. Sensor conflict between habitat regulators. The technician continued. The climate system has been sending contradictory environmental commands for the last 12 minutes. Several instructors groaned. A software conflict. Nothing dangerous. Nothing dramatic. Yet the consequences inside the habitat had been significant. To the students, the changes were barely noticeable. To a highly sensitive animal, the habitat had become unpredictable. Daniel nodded slowly. That explains it. Explains what? Ariel asked. Imagine if every light in your room brightened and dimmed randomly. Every sound changed volume. Every temperature shifted every few seconds. He glanced toward her. You would feel stressed too. Ariel looked back at the Varkesh runner. For the first time, she realized something important. Daniel was not analyzing the animal. He was empathizing with it. He was trying to understand what the world felt like from its perspective. 20 minutes later, the software conflict was resolved. Environmental readings stabilized. Normal habitat conditions returned. Gradually, natural sounds filled the forest again. Birds resumed singing. Smaller creatures emerged from shelter. The Varkesh runner lowered its head and returned to drinking from the stream. Around the observation platforms, tension dissolved. Students relaxed. Instructors resumed lectures. Researchers documented the incident for future review. The crisis was over. Yet Ariel barely noticed. She was still watching Daniel. The human gathered his tools, picked up his forgotten coffee, and prepared to leave as though nothing remarkable had happened. You knew exactly what it needed, Ariel said. Daniel shook his head. Not exactly. Then how? He considered the question for a moment. Most living things tell you what they need. Including humans? A faint smile appeared on his face. Especially humans. Then he headed toward the maintenance corridor. Ariel remained where she stood, staring at the quiet forest habitat. For weeks, she had searched for the secret hidden inside humanity. Strength, speed, awareness, survival instinct. Yet the answer now seemed surprisingly simple. The most extraordinary thing about Daniel Brooks was not that he noticed danger before anyone else. It was that once he noticed it, his first instinct was always to protect rather than dominate. 3 weeks later, Ariel Voss stood before the largest audience she had ever addressed. The Academy Symposium Hall stretched across nearly 200 yards of polished stone and transparent alloy. Tier after tier of seating rose toward a vaulted ceiling where holographic stars drifted slowly through the air. Professors, researchers, students, and visiting scholars from dozens of worlds filled the chamber. Some attended out of curiosity. Others came because rumors had spread about the exchange student whose research on humanity had unexpectedly challenged several long-standing assumptions. At the center of the hall, a presentation display hovered above the stage. Ariel looked at the assembled audience and remembered the day she first arrived at Meridian Station. Back then, she had believed humans were ordinary. Interesting, perhaps. Adaptable, certainly. But ordinary. The memory almost made her smile. The symposium moderator introduced her research project and stepped aside. The hall grew quiet. Ariel activated the presentation. A holographic image of Earth appeared above the stage. Blue oceans, white clouds, vast continents. A beautiful world. A difficult world. When I began this study, Ariel said, I believed the defining characteristic of humanity would be physical adaptation. New images appeared. Gravity statistics, environmental records, evolutionary studies, data familiar to every xenobiologist in attendance. Several professors nodded. They knew this information well. Earth is often classified as a death world, Ariel continued. Its gravity is unusually high. Its ecosystems historically contain numerous predators. Its climate remains unpredictable by many interstellar standards. More nods. Nothing controversial so far. Then the images changed. Security footage from the bioobservation dome. Daniel noticing the escaped animal before the sensors. Maintenance records. Environmental reports. Observation logs. Small moments collected over weeks. My conclusion was incorrect, Ariel said. The room became noticeably quieter. Humanity's uniqueness does not originate from strength alone. Several researchers leaned forward. Ariel continued. Nor does it originate from speed, intelligence, endurance, or environmental adaptation. Those qualities exist in many species. The image above the stage shifted again. This time it showed Daniel sitting beside the small, stressed laboratory animal, patiently waiting for trust instead of forcing cooperation. Then another image appeared. Daniel standing calmly inside the habitat during the environmental system failure. Watching, listening, understanding. Humans possess instincts shaped by a difficult world, Ariel said. They notice changes others miss. They identify problems before systems recognize them. They are remarkably aware of their surroundings. She paused. But that is not the most important thing. Complete silence filled the hall. The most important thing is what they choose to do with those instincts. The final image appeared. Daniel Brooks carrying his toolbox through an ordinary maintenance corridor. No dramatic heroism. No celebration. Just a human doing his job. Throughout this study, Ariel said softly, I repeatedly observed a pattern. Human awareness does not naturally lead toward domination. It often leads toward protection. They notice fear. They notice vulnerability. They notice problems. And then they try to help. Several students exchanged thoughtful glances. Some professors quietly began taking notes. Ariel looked toward the audience. Near the back row, almost hidden among maintenance personnel attending the symposium out of curiosity, sat Daniel himself. He looked mildly uncomfortable with the attention. Exactly as expected, the presentation ended to sustained applause. Later that evening, after the crowds dispersed and the symposium concluded, Ariel found herself standing beside the panoramic observation windows overlooking space. Stars stretched endlessly beyond the glass. Earth glowed in the distance, small and blue against the darkness. Footsteps approached. Daniel stopped beside her. I heard the presentation went well. Ariel smiled. You heard? People talk. For a few moments they stood together in comfortable silence. Finally Ariel looked toward the distant Earth. I think I understand now. Understand what? Daniel asked. She watched the blue planet turning slowly among the stars. Why so many species misunderstand humanity? Daniel raised an eyebrow. Ariel smiled faintly. Because everyone keeps looking for the predator. The reflection of distant starlight shimmered across the observation window. And they keep discovering the guardian instead. Daniel said nothing. He simply looked toward home. Somehow, that felt like the perfect answer.